Hi everybody, this is Noelle from Petitti Garden Centers, and we're here at our Oakwood Village store, and it's late winter. We're nearly rounding the corner into spring. We're not quite there yet, but we wanted to talk to you about something you could do indoors, gardening wise, and it's actually giving your summer blooming bulbs or your tender bulbs a head start indoors. So then when the good weather, the gardening weather starts rolling around, and we'll be ready, and these plants will get a head start on their growing, so you get blooms and nice root systems to go ahead and plant them outside after the last spring frost. So let's talk about tender bulbs today, and this is a really easy, fun gardening activity that you can do indoors. These bulbs are already arriving in stores late winter, of course. So many different varieties to choose from, and we're talking about the tender bulbs that they really do not winter over well, and in fact, after this last winter, they really wouldn't do well. But most of these bulbs are not usually zone hardy for our cold hardiness zone here in Northeast Ohio. So we're like 6A, and what I have here is I have things that you see all the time during our summers that are looking absolutely gorgeous. But again, if you leave them outside over winter, they'll perish, okay? So things like dahlias. Some of these dahlias, if you get them and plant them early, of course you'll have just longer bloom periods, more enjoyment out of them. So that's why we always recommend starting the dahlias early in pots with potting soil. Make sure your pots have great drainage, okay, or drainage holes, of course. Potting soil, because that soil is going to drain well, never hold too much moisture next to the actual tuberous roots that dahlias are, and of course, do their thing. And they'll start early, you'll get foliage early, you'll get great root development, and then of course, flower much earlier as well, okay? So dahlias are one of those types, and I'll show you those in a moment. Cannas too. Cannas are super popular around Northeast Ohio. We see all of that tropical foliage and flowering. It's one of the hummingbird's favorites in Northeast Ohio. So again, cannas are one of those great plants. Now, some people I know have had cannas winter over in their gardens, and typically it's because they're in this really warm microclimate, maybe closer to the house, maybe southern exposure, and in a protected area or alcove in the garden. And so yeah, they can come back sometimes when they're in more of a protected area, but normally we have to dig them again because they just aren't quite that hardy, that cold hardy for us. So cannas would be another type. They are a rhizome, so they kind of have this longer bulb underneath the soil, and then sometimes you see the eyes that are sticking up there. The next one that I have is actually gladiolus, and gladiolas are maybe twice the size of a crocus if you've ever planted crocus before. With gladiolas, again, they're summer bloomers, and they really produce really long lance leaf foliage, beautiful long or tall stems of flowers, and are really, really gorgeous. So they're worth a try, especially, and they're very, very easy to grow and start, again, in a container, get that foliage started, and then again, you'll get lots of flowering for them. Great cut flower, of course, and most of these are wonderful cut flowers. And then the last one I have here is actually an elephant ear, an alocasia. Sometimes you'll see colocasia, sometimes you'll see different names for them, but typically elephant ears, the larger leaf varieties are usually larger corms, which is their type of bulb. The smaller petite varieties are usually a smaller corm. So just take a look, and depending on what variety you want to grow, that's what you start with too. And again, getting them started in pots. You can grow actually alocasias year-round indoors as a house plant and enjoy them that way. They do really, really well. If you want them to get big, I would go ahead and suggest planting them in a larger pot, letting them fill out, getting them started indoors, of course, late winter, early spring, and then taking them outside and really, taking care of them outdoors in sun to shade. Again, they can take a lot of different light exposures, but they start to really fill out outdoors, keep them fed, keep them watered. They do really, really well. Okay, to start out with, again, when you're growing these, start with a pot that has drainage holes in it, okay? And then, again, potting soil, okay, or a potting mixture. You wanna make sure it's potting mix again because it will drain so much better than a, planting mix, something that's meant more for outdoor gardens. You don't necessarily wanna use that with bulbs because, again, with any of these types of bulbs, you don't want them to stay wet, overly wet. That's bad. That will actually rot their tubers, bulbs, rhizomes, what have you. Okay, so just keep that in mind. The next thing is, what I normally do is I will fill the pots about half full with potting soil, especially when I'm planting my Gladiolus, when I'm planting my elephant ears, when I'm planting Cannas as well, okay? And with those, I tend to fill the pot halfway up with soil, go ahead and place the bulbs in. And with some of the bulbs, it's hard to tell which way is up. And don't get me wrong, bulbs are amazing, amazing plants where they will right themselves eventually. But if you can start with the pointy side up typically, or if you see the eyes on the rhizome of the Cannas, or you can tell where the stem is on the Dahlia tuberous roots, that really helps. So as long as that's pointing up, you're ready to go, okay? And then go ahead and cover with potting soil over the top. Give yourself about an inch of watering space from the top of the pot and go ahead and thoroughly moisten the soil so the water runs out, and then go ahead and do that one more time. Thoroughly moisten the soil, let the water run out, and then you're gonna place this in a bright area. You can place them under fluorescent lights as well, and we usually suggest about fluorescent lighting. You can stick about, the pot's about 6 inches, or I should say the light should be about 6 inches above the pot lip, okay? And as the plant grows, of course, you've got to raise that lighting unit up, okay? But bright indirect light works really, really well for these. The warmer temperatures that you have inside the home or the room are going to make these plants obviously push out a little bit faster. The cooler they are will kind of slow them down a little bit. Either way, it works. As long as the temperatures are above 40 degrees Fahrenheit, okay? We really don't want your bulbs to get cold, and if you've just watered them, if they're cold and wet, that is not a good combination, okay? So make sure above 40 degrees, and you can put them out in the garage if you have a heated garage and you can keep the temperature above 40 degrees. That's something that would work. Down in the basement, as long as you have lighting, that would work as well. So different areas that you can look for as far as starting your summer blooming bulbs or tender bulbs, okay? I think the last thing that I should mention is dahlias. I planted the dahlia a little bit differently because with dahlias, I tend to give them a large pot, so a 12-inch pot, and usually out in the landscape, one cluster, I should say, of tuberous roots of dahlia really fill about a foot by foot space, okay? So with the pot, I wanted to start with a 12-inch wide pot, and this one's almost 12 inches in depth. It's about 10 inches in depth, okay? I filled the bottom third with soil, kind of nestled the dahlia tubers down into the soil, and I made sure that the stem is sticking up, and you just want the stem exposed, okay? So you fill in and you go ahead and put soil on top of those tuberous roots, and you just see the stem sticking up. And as the dahlia grows and as you maintain it, of course, you start filling in with more potting mix, okay? So that's really a good key for the dahlias because those stems, as they develop, are really, really heavy. And as you keep on filling in with your potting soil or potting mix, it will support the stem as that plant gets larger and larger. Okay, so that's a good way to grow dahlias. So just remember that if you're potting up dahlias early, they really want to be snuggled down in that bottom third of the pot. A deep pot is fine, and then just keep on filling in as they start to grow and fill out, okay? One last thing that I forgot to mention is I put my potting mix in, and then I actually took just small handfuls of bulb tone to sprinkle in the pot. It's about a tablespoon for each bulb that you're growing. So just refer to the package label if you have a larger pot or a larger area, of course, that you're growing bulbs. Now you're going to maintain them. You're going to water them only when they get mostly dry, and then you're going to go back and thoroughly water them again, as I mentioned before, 2 times, let them drain out, okay? The other thing that you're looking for is now waiting until that last spring frost, okay? So normally in our neck of the woods, it's about May 15th. So mid-May, keep your eyes out for that. You're gonna slowly transition these summer blooming bulbs outside on nice days. First start in the shade. Then after a few days, go ahead and move them maybe into a partially shaded area. And then again, wait a few days, move them into that sunnier area where you're going to grow them, okay? What else do I wanna tell you? That's really tender bulbs in a nutshell. Just remember, when you're starting them early, look at the calendar. You wanna start them about 6 to 8 weeks before that last frost date. So we're talking about Northeast Ohio, usually around mid-March, so you have some time to come in, shop for your favorite varieties, pick up your potting mix, pick up your bulb tone, pick up your pots, and then go ahead and really enjoy doing some gardening indoors, late winter, early spring. Enjoy.